Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. My name is Anas El-Gamati. I'm the director of the Cette Institut, Tripoli-based think tank. I'd like to welcome you all back for this wonderful session. We have a really exciting and distinguished panel that is sitting all around the tables here for the 4 o'clock session entitled The Death and Reset of Multilateralism. Now, when I was thinking about the name of this panel today, I couldn't tell if it was a love letter or if it was an obituary. It's a really interesting title because we're facing challenges that are unprecedented today in the 21st century. We're just coming out, fingers crossed, of a global pandemic that has challenged the way that we knew the world and the way that we're viewing the world going forward. We have renewed tensions in the Indo-Pacific between the United States and China. And we have what threatens to be, according to other panels today, World War III for the pessimists, or just another war in Ukraine. But these challenges are not only challenges to the way that we live, but they're challenges to the system, to the multilateral system that we have known for the last century. And so, without further ado, I want to give the floor to His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Peter Szijjártó. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You're very kind. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me first thank the organizers to include me to this panel and giving me the chance to address the question whether there's a reset or a death of multilateralism. Well, if we look at the situation straightforward, then we can understand that during the last little bit less than 3 years, the global political and economic order was turned upside down twice. And we do not remember any period of time when within such a short period we would have experienced such restructuring of global political and economic order twice in a row. And the reason for that, of course, were 2 major challenges which proved to be global and unprecedented, at least when it comes to our generation. One health-related, which was a pandemic, and one security-related, which is the war in Ukraine. And if we are honest, at least to ourselves, then we cannot hide away from saying that multilateralism was not able to pass these 2 stress tests. During COVID, we can recall international organizations waking up a little bit late, and you can put little bit into parentheses, maybe with one exception, which was the WHO. And when it comes to the war, we regret to see that multilateral organizations are not able to offer a platform for dialogue and discussion about how to make peace out of the war. I'm representing a country, Hungary, which is usually attacked for not following the positions dictated by the international liberal mainstream, but representing positions which are specifically Hungarian and are based on our national interest. Maybe it's not very modest, but realistic to say that if I look back to the last challenges and crises we had to be faced with, then I can say that our answers have worked out well, and our answers proved to be successful, and we came out from all the crises so far stronger compared to how we entered them. And still there's an overwhelming public support lended to the government, which has been in office for 13 years now, which makes us the most stable political system in Europe. And it's very unique under the current circumstances that a government, a ruling party, can win 4 continuous elections with a 2/3 majority. So if I can refer back to COVID, then the reason why Hungary was able to give or to carry out the quickest vaccination campaign in Europe was that we have not waited for the multilateral solution. We have not made a political or ideological question out of the health and lives of the people. And the only basis of judgment for whether a vaccine is able to be used or not was a professional way of judgment. And we did not care about where the vaccine was coming from. We only cared about whether it was able to save lives of the people or not. And that ended up in Hungary reopening its economy as a first country in Europe, and that ended up in 2021 being the most successful year of Hungarian economy ever since the fall of communism, which took place in 1990. And after 2021, we thought that we are over the challenges. Some more tranquil period would be coming, but then the war broke out. And again, I'm representing a country, Hungary, which is a direct neighbor of Ukraine. So you can imagine that to the extent you feel the impacts of the war here, thousands of kilometers away, you can imagine how severe and immediate are the impacts of the war on us Hungarians being located in the direct neighborhood. That's why Hungary is super interested in peace, and that's why Hungary is super concerned about how fast the world is running to the totally other direction. And here we can discover three major problems, I think. First, that there are hardly anyone who speaks about the peace under the current circumstances. Hardly anyone. But it is almost everybody who makes statements which then bring the risk of further escalation. Second problem, that there is no direct communication between those who should be involved in the communication in order to prevent further escalation of the current war. And third, and here I come to the question of today, that the multilateral organizations have, at least so far, failed to offer platforms for discussions, at the outcome of which we could come to peace. And I have to tell you that we are deeply disappointed by the fact that the United Nations, which was created to offer platform even for hostile parties to talk to each other or being at war, has failed to offer such kind of platform so far. And, you know, UN should be the last resort to be utilized for negotiations in order to stop war and to put an end to suffering. And what we experience so far is definitely to the contrary. Unfortunately, the multilateral organizations were used, or rather to say misused, for deepening this conflict. Instead of looking for solutions, we have experienced these multilateral organizations becoming platforms to extend the hostilities. And the politicization of these organizations, I think, are serious mistakes. And annulling platforms of dialogue is basically a crime under current situation. I would like to remind everybody that United Nations was not created to offer a platform for like-minded countries. It was established to offer a platform to countries which might be in war, might be in hostile relationship, but be able to discuss around a negotiating table. When it comes to the General Assembly taking place in September, we really had the hope that the UNGA would offer a platform for dialogue. But just to the contrary, I was the only European foreign minister to meet the Russian foreign minister, and you cannot imagine those attacks, what I have received. And you know, it's crazy. If you meet with someone on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly and you are being attacked, why you have done so. And I think it's extremely alarming, and it shows that there are strong forces around the world who do not want the communication channels to be re-established. And if we do not re-establish the communication channels in the multilateral organizations, that means that we give up even the hope for peace. And I have to tell you that if peace doesn't come soon, then we in Europe will continue to suffer a lot. Impacts of the war are clear. Skyrocketing energy prices, skyrocketing inflation, skyrocketing prices of commodities and food. It's clear. And it's also clear who takes the benefit out of this situation. And we understand that if you are an ocean away, if you are thousands of kilometers away, that might look differently. But from the neighborhood, I have to tell you, that seems to be really, really dangerous and serious situation. Because if escalation takes place, then it's always the neighborhood to be at risk at the first page. So it's obvious, I think, who should talk to whom under current situation. Because those who think that through Ukrainian-Russian dialogue, this war could be solved or resolved or brought to its end, it's naive. There must be discussion taking place between United States and Russia in order to overcome this conflict. And international community should urge these two of them, United States and Russia, to sit around the negotiations table. We understand that G20 offers a chance for that, and it would be very hard to explain for both presidents, if they are both there, why not they would not meet. Why they would not meet. It would be very hard to explain. But if we cannot grab the chance at G20, then UN must be able to ensure that a dialogue will be started. And if the United Nations if the United Nations fail to offer a platform and fail to force these two to sit together, then I think it would be a huge failure of the UN. And if this failure takes place, then I think it would raise the question what that big amount of money is being spent for, what is being given to them for operation. And that would bring forward the need of a deep reform, maybe even a restructuring of the multilateral world, including the United Nations. But this is for the future. What is for the present is to unite our efforts in order to make peace in Ukraine, to force an immediate ceasefire to be established and negotiations to be started. If we fail to do so, then the situation can get very easily out of control, and I don't think we would like to experience that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We appreciate the time that you've given us this afternoon. Thank you very much. It's a curious opening and keynote to begin this exciting session, and some food for thought that perhaps the UN Security Council requires deep reform and restructuring of the UN Security Council, that perhaps the multilateral platforms that we knew are no longer going to continue in front of us, but that even during COVID, that the multilateral systems that we require take time and are lagging. We're interested in hearing the rest of the speakers, an exciting panel in front of me. Let me, without further ado, introduce to you His Excellency Mr. Mankou Ndiaye, the former Senegalese Minister of Foreign Affairs. Please, Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Modérateur, chers collègues ministres, chers collègues anciens ministres des Affaires étrangères et honorables invités. Je suis très heureux de prendre part à ce panel sur la nécessaire réinvention du multilatéralisme. Je ferai quelques éléments théoriques sur les relations internationales, mais également j'évoquerai des questions de pratique des relations internationales. Et l'on définit souvent le multilatéralisme. Je pense que pour nous entendre, il faut d'abord qu'on s'entende sur les concepts, sur leur définition. Et l'on définit souvent le multilatéralisme comme étant la technique qui privilégie, au plan des relations internationales, les rapports de chaque pays avec l'ensemble des autres. Et en parlant de rapports, naturellement, on pense aux règles, on pense aux normes qui définissent ces rapports, on pense également au mode d'organisation de ces rapports. Nous ne sommes plus alors dans l'état de nature que Thomas Hobbes définissait comme un monde où chacun dispose du droit absolu de recourir à la force pour se faire justice. Le XXe siècle a vu le multilatéralisme connaître un essor fulgurant avec notamment la création en 1945 de l'Organisation des Nations Unies et de son système qui s'est développé par la suite, avec la multiplication des organisations internationales, le système de Bretton Woods, le boom des relations économiques et commerciales internationales fondées sur les règles du GATT d'abord, puis depuis quelques années sur celles de l'OMC. L'ONU, nous sommes tous d'accord, l'ONU demeure le cadre d'action du multilatéralisme par essence, le lieu, comme le dit la charte, où s'harmonisent les efforts des peuples pour la paix. Mais je dois préciser que le multilatéralisme n'annihile pas du tout la capacité d'action individuelle des États, encore moins leur puissance individuelle. Il s'agit d'un principe d'action qui permet de faire face de manière concertée, convenue aux enjeux globaux, comme la construction de la paix, comme par exemple la défense du climat, comme la lutte contre pour la protection de la santé publique mondiale, contre les grandes endémies, la lutte contre le terrorisme, pour ne citer que ces domaines d'action. Nous sommes tous d'accord qu'aucun État pris individuellement, quelle que soit sa puissance, ne peut seul faire face et relever tous ces défis. Edmund Burke, homme politique irlandais du XVIIIe siècle, écrivait « Ne peuvent agir avec fruit ceux qui n'agissent pas de concert. Ne peuvent agir de concert ceux qui n'agissent pas en confiance. Ne peuvent agir en confiance ceux qui ne sont pas liés par des opinions communes, des affections communes ou des intérêts communs. » Fin de citation. Au cœur du multilatéralisme, il y a l'État qui en est le moteur. Aujourd'hui, les Nations Unies en comptent 193, d'inégales forces et capacités, de petits comme de grands États, par la superficie naturellement, des pauvres comme des riches, des démocraties comme des dictatures, chacun tentant de défendre et de promouvoir son intérêt national, entre guillemets, sa propre diplomatie, au sein d'organisations communes, au sein des Nations Unies et de son système. Aujourd'hui, nous vivons dans un monde radicalement changé, complexe, dangereux, mais profondément interdépendant. Rappelons rapidement quelques propos récents. Au cours de l'année écoulée, notre monde a connu de grands bouleversements. Une crise croissante de l'insécurité alimentaire, des records de chaleur, des records d'incendie, des records d'inondations, de sécheresse, la Covid, l'inflation, une guerre inutile comme en Ukraine. C'est le président Biden qui parle ainsi le 21 septembre devant l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Autre propos, allons à l'essentiel, ne nous résignons pas à la fragmentation du monde et à la montée des menaces à la paix. Ne permettons pas que les crises s'additionnent, que les conflits sans solution se multiplient et que prolifèrent les armes de destruction massive. Les membres du P5 ne sont pas les seuls à avoir leur mot à dire et s'ils l'ont, et ils l'ont incontestablement, cela ne peut désormais fonctionner que si nous sommes capables d'œuvrer plus largement au consensus international nécessaire à la paix. C'est le président Macron qui parlait devant l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies le 20 septembre. Dernier propos que je vais citer, le monde est devenu plus dangereux et plus incertain. Sous l'emprise combinée du réchauffement climatique, des périls sécuritaires et sanitaires, ainsi que de la guerre en Ukraine, il urge d'agir ensemble pour apaiser les tensions, soigner notre planète, réduire les inégalités persistantes nord-sud et redonner sens au multilatéralisme. C'est le président Macky Sall qui parlait ainsi le 20 septembre 2022 devant l'Assemblée générale. Laissez-moi terminer. L'expression est lâchée, chers collègues. Redonner sens au multilatéralisme, donc le réinventer. Oui, le système international, après 1945, a connu une série de crises qui nécessitent aujourd'hui, au regard de la complexification des relations internationales et l'émergence de nouvelles menaces de toute nature, sa refonte globale et un réengagement pour la protection et le respect des normes internationales. Et je terminerai très rapidement, chers collègues, en disant ceci, qu'avec la crise du Covid, nous avons vu le multilatéralisme être attaqué directement. Nous avons constaté toute la faillite, entre guillemets, du multilatéralisme, l'absence de solidarité internationale. Aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce qu'on a constaté? Qu'il y a des priorités nouvelles qu'il faut absolument prendre en compte si on veut réinventer le multilatéralisme. C'est d'abord la crise climatique, ce sont les droits de l'homme, c'est le règlement des crises, c'est la lutte contre la pauvreté. Donc je pense qu'il faut réinventer le multilatéralisme, c'est-à-dire s'entendre sur la priorité de notre monde, réimaginer la manière dont les Nations Unies coopèrent, repenser la solidarité entre les peuples et les nations, surtout dans des moments de grave crise mondiale. C'est repenser aussi l'économie et le commerce, c'est aussi réparer les inégalités. Merci beaucoup, je mettrai à la disposition de l'assistant.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'd like to introduce His Excellency, the former Foreign Minister of Turkey, Yasir Yakish, please.
Thank you very much, Highness, for giving me the floor. The question that we are discussing is the death and the rebirth or reset of the multilateralism. I believe that the multilateralism has never died. Actually, it started to exist since the quadruple alliance of 1815 Vienna Conference, and it continues to exist since that time. It's multilateralism. But of course, there was setbacks in the multilateralism, but it is always developing. After the First World War, the multilateralism became more structured, and the League of Nations was born, but it could not prevent Italy's invasion of Ethiopia and Germany's invasion of the Czech Republic and Poland. The United Nations organization that was set up to correct the vices and the mistakes of the League of Nations is still standing, but it is fraught with problems stemming from the veto power of the permanent members, as His Excellency the Minister of Senegal mentioned. The permanent members of the UN Security Council is causing a problem. There is a feeling that this question is slowly ripening, and a major international event may usher in a new era, and we may pass to another structure. Many important countries, such as Germany, Japan, India, Brazil, Spain-speaking countries, raise their voice to claim that the present international order is unjust. They want a fairer representation of the Security Council in the Security Council, or put an end to the veto right. I hope that this will happen sooner or later. Perhaps we need another crisis so that this question could be straightened. The Ukraine war may be instrumental, because when there are major changes in the international arena, there may be a new start. We may also expect that this question be settled in the foreseeable future. You asked, the organizer asked the question whether the war in Ukraine and its consequences are the result of an utopian and ineffective approach to the multilateralism. My answer to this question is no. NATO and the EU's reaction to the invasion of Ukraine is what the international community had to do. It is not utopian, it is not ineffective. On the contrary, it proved to be effective to a certain extent only. NATO's and the EU's plan to provide more support to all sorts to Ukraine may contribute to the solution and to the solution of this conflict. If not, it may at least prevent further deterioration of the situation. And this concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So, in summary, we've been here before. This isn't the first time that we've seen the international order being tested in this way. If we look at the examples of what happened with Italy in the First World War, and then we look again at the stress testing, you think that multilateralism can continue. So I'd like to use that for inspiration and continue the conversation by introducing His Excellency, Mr. Patrick Rajoelina, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Madagascar. I'm not sure if we have him with us. If we don't, then I would like to move on to our next speaker. Without further ado, Her Excellency, Mrs. Asiya bin Saleh Al-Alawi, the Interim Ambassador of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation, and Moroccans residing abroad. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anas. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. I would like to extend first my thanks to Brahim Fassi for inviting me to these MEDays, and I'm very happy to see the relaunch in presence of this important forum. Just a few points, or perhaps a few hints, which will recall the obvious that unfortunately everybody forgets. And allow me to start with a couple of remarks concerning the title itself. I'm not sure that the word death and neither the date, 2020, are really appropriate in this context. Let's just remind what everybody knows, that World War II winners have established the multilateral system, and that it has been contested very early by the wake-up of the third world countries, which were totally excluded from world governance. And it has been hampered by the Cold War. And we have seen ups and downs and a few crises in the evolution of this multilateralism, which were becoming more and more anachronic with the realities of the situation across the world, and especially in the developing countries, and the emergence of new powers, which were excluded again, until it had to adjust to live with this hegemonic multilateralism, let's face it, and call, you know, un chat, as the French say, until the day that President Trump's unilateral approaches on all fronts of the international arena had the only objective to make America great again at the expense of multilateralism. Beyond the withdrawal from international accords like the Paris Accord and from international agencies, President Trump has waged a real war to the United Nations system, which has damaged it somehow, and it is very difficult to recover fully what it used to be, and this is forgotten in the meantime. So, reducing funds, paralyzing WTO, on which many hopes were founded, and the pandemic, of course, brought life itself to a standstill. And of course, we have seen the international community incapable of providing decent, I don't say appropriate, just decent answers to the needs of the health of the population of the weakest, the poorest, and I'm talking about Africa, which was a real shame. And of course, they could not, the institution of Bretton Woods could not provide either the basic financial support to the devastating socio-economic effects of the pandemic. So, of course, the attempts to relaunch the recovery have been seriously damaged by the war in Ukraine. So that's why I contest as well the word reset, because there was a timid waking up of the recovery, but they have been stopped and hampered again by the war in Ukraine. The real causes are actually intertwined historical facts and present, perhaps, provocations. I don't agree with the formulation of the proposal that it is probably the result of utopian or inefficient multilateralism. On the contrary, I think it's sheer expression of unilateral decisions, the expansion of NATO, let's name it, misimplementation of the Minsk Accords, and on the other hand, the invasion by Putin's of Ukraine, probably encouraged by the blank check given about Syria, non-response to the chemical weapons use. So, very quick, short of real reshuffling of the Security Council, there will be no reinvention of multilateralism, and we do know that this is unlikely to happen. So just very quick few points to relaunch international cooperation. First, end the war in Ukraine, and end the discussion. I have perhaps a bizarre proposal, but there is one, because there is no exit strategy in the horizon. And second, we do have to make sure that international escalation of tensions have really to be a little bit, lowered, especially between United States and China, and we have seen now North Korea as well starting. But more profoundly and more importantly, I think that the common will should come around vital, basic issues which are common to the survival of humanity. I have named climate change and deterioration of environment. And here we have the global stress test of COP27 and how we are going to handle it. And very quickly, just a final point, that it is important that solidarity is at the end of the day for the sake of our self-interest and survival. And that's why we have to reduce inequalities as well and seek better common response to this. And perhaps in the discussions we can speak about other little, glimmer of hopes here and there.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. A timid waking up for the system, interesting and curious comments as well. I'd like to come to our dear friend of many years who I've shared many panels with, His Excellency Mr. Mustafa Kamal Kazi, the former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. We are really witnessing today a full-scale revival of polarized geopolitics, great power competition, risky military confrontation, fights over resources, and real danger of escalation into a nuclear war. These geopolitical risks are colliding with complex new challenges, such as climate change, pandemics, financial turmoil, global supply chain issues, and nuclear proliferation. But given the polarized state of affairs between major powers, new challenges such as it has become nearly impossible for them to work together on regional and international challenges, even when it is in their interest to do so. America emerged as a main driver of the Cold War order, but it grossly mismanaged. In fact, Washington abused its unipolar moment and uncontested primacy as a result of forever wars, particularly after 9/11. We must not forget that after World War II, it brought us a realization that nationalism and fascism were at the root of conflicts in Europe. So after the war, there were efforts to break the national walls and reinforce regional cooperation. ECC was a great success story. Subsequently, after the end of Cold War, this evolved into globalization. Now, will the history be repeated? I hope not. It is unfortunate that the prevailing circumstances have pushed us to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. To a great extent, it is widely perceived to be because of failure of the Western political leaders to be objective, forthright about the causes of escalating conflicts. The relentless Western narrative that the West is noble while Russia, China are evil is simple-minded and dangerous. It is widely viewed in the global South as an attempt to manipulate the public opinion and to avoid dealing with real and pressing issues affecting them. What is worrisome, it seems there was a search for enemies after the collapse of Soviet Union. So they found one after 9/11. We saw Islamophobia, continuing to find strong resonance in political spheres in Europe and USA. This is leading institutionalization of Islamophobia through new legislations and policies. One cannot understand why this urge to find, in the political elites in the West, to find enemies. Starting with Islamophobia, we now see Sinophobia, Russophobia, and one does not know how many more phobias will determine threat perception and discourse in the West. It is, maybe it's because of the need of the, yeah. Well, happily, there is shift in global economic and political paradigm as a result of rise of China, with a strong promise of Asian century, powerful regional and intra-regional groupings such as BRICS, SCO, ASEAN, and Africa Union. In fact, the combined GDP of G7 is now less than that of BRICS, while G7 population is just 6% of the global population compared to 41% of the BRICS. So we have now to see that supra-sovereign of the world now should now realize that unipolarism is dead, multilateralism is on rise. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. So, another, we've seen this all before, the dangerous Western narrative and the beginning of forever wars since 9/11. So, again, very curious comments. I'm sure we'll have many questions afterwards. Without further ado, I'd like to also introduce now Her Excellency Mrs. Romana Manescu, the former Romanian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Transport, and member of the European Parliament, currently active in the public affairs and strategic planning space. Please, Foreign Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be in such distinguished presence with such distinguished panelists, and thank you for the audience for being here to share with us the views on this really broad topic, which of course raised a lot of questions. Most of them were already discussed and addressed, especially when it's about the UN and its effectiveness. It's true that the hot topic of today is the Russian invasion of Ukraine in late February 2022, which could not have come in a worse time for the global economy. And it was indeed a culmination of unresolved issues in global cooperation since the fall of the Wall of Berlin and the dislocation of the Soviet Union. A question remains still, and it's still unanswered, whether a better or more reasonable form of cooperation or global cooperation could have deterred Russia from invading Ukraine. A stronger and more coherent cooperation, particularly on security matters, may have reduced the odds of this invasion. And to answer this question, I will try to look from the perspective of the European Union, because we have discussed only about the United Nations. European Union, it's as well a multilateral format, which it's seen in many of its aspects, it's a very successful one, and it can be a good example, because we are indeed a union of countries with many things in common, but, and there is always a but, our national interest can make a huge difference when it comes to getting things done. You see, there are two currents of thoughts in the European Union. One is the Europe of nations, and one is the federal Europe. And the two are profoundly contradictory in terms and approaches, and sometimes even provoke irreparable damages and clashes. If we only take the issue of energy security, for instance, which is a hot topic also due to the war in Ukraine, this was raised for the last 15 years, but different countries saw it and look at it from their own perspectives, without thinking of others. Only from the pure economic and profit point of view. As such, the countries that you see that they promote exclusively gas from Russia, they are now the countries struggling the most. I will not enter into more details because I want also to touch another point which refers to the effects of this war, which are global effects and are economically, socially impacting the whole world, and especially the south part of the world. And this ongoing war exacerbating the global food security, as both Russia and Ukraine are major players in agriculture and food production. The war in Europe exacerbating global food security and energy security, and that creates in this moment another issue for the multilateral format to discuss about and to think about how to cooperate in a coherent way, not in a national driven way, in order to find the right answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your interesting comments about this balancing act, and particularly focusing on the energy security risks. There's really the current practical test to the multilateral system. So thank you again for your comments. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ofer Winter, who is a senior research fellow at INSS. Please, Mr. Winter.
Thank you very much, Anas. I would like also to thank the Amadeus Institute. Thank you for this invitation and Yusra, our coordinator. I would like to give an Israeli perspective. During the last years, Israel have been able to turn some of the regional and global challenges also to opportunity for multilateral collaboration and better enhancing the regional integration. And I think that a good example is the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, EMGF, that was formed in 2019 and became in 2021 an international organization with Egypt, Israel, Cyprus, Greece, Italy, France, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, and also as observers the EU, the United States, and the World Bank. And the mutual challenge was that there were some gas explorations in the southern Mediterranean and shortage of energy in the northern countries of Europe. Of course, this challenge was escalating over the past year following the war in Ukraine. And many European countries are looking for alternative for the Russian gas, as we all know, at least partial alternatives. And the response was a better integration between infrastructures, between pipelines that were unused between Israel, Egypt, and other countries. And it enabled us to get gas deals, long-range ones, for 10 years between Egypt, Israel, Cyprus. Only last June, a memorandum of understanding was signed between Israel, the EU, and Egypt for 3 years in order to develop gas explorations in the economic waters of Egypt and Israel, and developing also the infrastructure of gas. And it caused a positive regional dynamics, including last month, the demarcation agreement between Israel and Lebanon. Maybe Egypt will also sell Israeli gas through the Arab pipeline to Lebanon. And really new geopolitics in this area. We might see in the upcoming months the signing of an agreement to develop also the Gaza Marine field that will serve the people of Gaza and the Palestinian Authority. And we also see Turkey as a more collaborative partner, normalizing its relations with Egypt, with Israel. Maybe also other countries such as Morocco, maybe even Libya, could be in the future a part of this pragmatic, inclusive approach. And I hope that also our next government will stick to this positive line in order to foster and nurture the mutual space of the Mediterranean as a space of cooperation, security, stability, prosperity, and with the participation of both southern countries and northern countries. It will, I think, benefit all our small neighborhood, and there is also a potential for future synergy also in the field not only of gas, but also of renewable energies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winter. Looking at the geopolitics of energy security and bringing countries together in the region is an interesting example of how multilateralism 2.0, perhaps, very interesting. Without further ado, I'd like to also introduce a good friend, Carola Ramon, the Undersecretary for Federal Planning of the Ministry of Economy and the former Undersecretary for Multilateralism in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Government of Argentina. Madam Ramon, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start by saying I'm a firm believer in multilateralism, but a multilateralism that works, that's dynamic, that solves problems for everyone. Now, that's not happening. I don't believe it's dead either, but I think resetting is the most appropriate course of action. Why do we reset things? We reset them when they're not working properly. And most of the times when we are told that we should reset something, the problem that does it, the person that suggests that doesn't know why it's not working either. No one knows why, no one has a solution, but let's reset and see what happens. So I think we have two things. One is why the problems that makes us reset, and then the other thing is, well, okay, we'll reset it, and what's going to happen afterwards. So first, let's concentrate on why it's not working. I'm going to approach it from a more economic point of view, because that's basically what I do and what I've been involved in. But as I see, there are several problems. First, geopolitical tensions started creeping up into the agendas more and more, leaving less space for the smaller countries' problems. Secondly, there's some unresolved issues and some issues that have mandate, especially when talking about WTO, some agricultural reforms, fisheries. We have the appellate body that's not working. And then we have new problems. We have the problems with the vaccines. We have the refusal to waive the patenting for the vaccines when it was crucial to do so, and as saying, preventing a lot of people from getting vaccines in time. So the question is, where is multilateralism when we need it the most? And clearly, it's under great pressure at the moment. A lot of people are unhappy. The big players are not happy either. But most importantly, and like my colleagues have mentioned, I think it's important to note that the voice of the smaller countries, the less developed countries, the developing countries, those are the ones that are least happy about multilateralism, and that we see that our topics are less and less in the agendas. Now, we press the button, and what happens? Is it all going to be the same, and we still have problems, or is it going to magically disappear? I think none. I think we'll have to work really hard at it. We'll still have the same problems. It looks as if one half of the world is getting vaccines, moving into the climate agenda, talking about digitalization in the industries, and the other half of the world is the other half of the world that's always trying to catch up with new items on the agenda and never fully addressing the pending issues that are at the core of our development, our sustainable development. I suspect that this trend will continue to be reinforced, and more walls rather than bridges will be built. So I think we definitely need an agenda that comes from the global south, and how to do this, I'll leave it for another intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. An interesting perspective to have, the economic perspective on multilateralism and the belief that this is a reset and not a death. So really curious, interesting comments as well moving forward. Without further ado, I'd like to also introduce to us Mr. Amir Ohana, His Excellency, former Minister of Public Security and a member of the Israeli Knesset. Please, Mr. Ohana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anas. Thank you, everyone. If there is one lesson that my country has learned in its 70 years years of existence, and maybe, if I may say so, my people learned in their 2,000 years of exile, is that we must be able to defend ourselves by ourselves. Alliances are good. Relationships are great and very important. I was fortunate enough to be a minister in the government that signed the Abraham Accords, having not one, but 4 peace agreements, peace treaties with Arab countries, one of which is this country, Morocco, which I was fortunate enough to visit with my family because both my parents were born and raised here in Morocco. And one of our missions, as you probably heard, in light of the results of the Israeli elections that we got yesterday, meaning we will form the next coalition. It's going to be a stable coalition for 4 years. And one of its missions will be to expand the Abraham Accords to more Arab countries. And not only that, I think we should expand also our alliances and relationships with other African countries. I do see the potential of Africa. I do see the cooperations that we can potentially have if we work on that, on many, many fields, agriculture, high-tech, sciences. But we must not forget the lesson, and I think the Ukrainians would agree that you must be able to defend yourselves by yourselves. I'm saying it as a representative of probably the most threatened country on the globe.
Thank you very much for your comments, Your Excellency. I'd like to move on to our friend Mr. Biova Kabin, the Senior Director for Programs at the Corporate Council in Africa, the Corporate Council in Africa in the USA. Mr. Kabin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anas, and thank you to Amadeus Institute for inviting us to this great meeting of minds. Corporate Council in Africa is more on the trade and investment side, so my approach will come from there. And we really promote U.S. investment in Africa. We've been doing it for 30 years. And we believe in multilateralism. We believe that we should not throw the baby out with the dirty water. In this case, humanity is the baby. And when we look at on the African side, I think African countries are buying into the idea of a relaunch of multilateralism. And a great example is the Africa Free Trade area that's now going to put 54 countries into one unified economic bloc. What that means is clearly a belief that together they are stronger, a belief that some of the belief that other regions had come up with is valid and should be explored and deepened. And what that would mean for Africa is a number of things. It's the African country will be able to create more jobs internally, more wealth, retain it, protect themselves, defend themselves, like the Honorable Minister said earlier. Also generate innovation and make Africa more attractive to local, but also foreign investors. And I was reading a couple of days ago that one of the major African banks, for example, Southern African banks, now is looking at investing in North Africa, which was never heard of a few years back, which once again, to my point that multilateralism is a must. And some of and I think on the African side as well, the continent has suffered enough, I believe, for lack of unity, lack of coming together in one voice. And we are seeing also in when we're looking at global climate change and difficulty for African countries to leverage their natural resources, be able to continue their development, and simple things like being able to finance natural gas projects has been an issue. And I believe as Africans are coming together, that also helps investment to be able to invest in larger projects. And I'm going to finish by saying this. And another good example of that is the Morocco-Nigeria gas infrastructure pipeline that will connect almost 13, 14 African countries on the West African coast. 2 or 3, maybe 5 of them have proven natural resources deposit, which means that they can be developed not just to export gas to the European countries, but also to turn into from develop gas to power project, also fertilizer project, which will create industrialization. So once again, on the business side, on the economic side, what we're seeing is clearly there's the relaunch. There's a saying that where there's a casting down, others will say there's a lifting up, and I believe on the African side, there's a lifting up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kabin. On positive notes, I'm picking up a trend from yourself and Madame Ramon's also comments on this trend of innovation and economic cooperation being the new lever for multilateralism. So thank you again for your comments. I'd like to turn the floor to another dear friend, Mr. Bakary Samba. He is the director of the Timbuktu Institute, African Center for Peace Studies. Please, Mr. Samba, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Je remercie beaucoup l'Institut Amadeus d'avoir, encore une fois, m'invité à prendre part à ce MEDays. C'est toujours avec satisfaction que j'y participe lorsque cela donne l'opportunité à l'Afrique de parler du monde à partir de cette belle terre marocaine, mais aussi au reste du monde de parler du monde à partir de l'Afrique. Donc c'est tout à fait symbolique pour moi d'être ici et je félicite encore Amadeus et toutes les autorités marocaines. Moi je pense que quand on parle du multilatéralisme, je ne me fais pas de soucis. Pourquoi? On dit qu'il faut que ça change, mais je suis sûr que ça va changer et ça va changer rapidement. Pourquoi je le dis? Il y a 3 choses, 3 arguments au moins qui militent en faveur de cela. Premièrement, nous sommes dans un monde divisé, où les alignements sont multiples et diffus. Deuxièmement, la distribution de la puissance n'a jamais été aussi fragmentée et qu'aujourd'hui on assiste à des puissances classiques qui déclinent, comme en Europe, et à des multitudes d'États qui réclament le statut de middle power. Le troisième argument, et non des moindres pour moi, c'est que l'Afrique vit ce double effet d'une élite de plus en plus décomplexée et qui regarde le monde en face et d'une opinion publique de plus en plus exigeante vis-à-vis de ces élites-là. Et que des crises comme la crise de la Covid ont montré les immenses ressources qu'il y a autour de la coopération sud-sud, matérialisée par 2 exemples. L'exemple de Sa Majesté le roi Mohammed VI avec les États africains pendant la crise de la Covid, mais aussi les prises de position courageuse du président Macky Sall lors de sa présence de l'Union africaine et récemment lors du forum de Dakar. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, les choses vont changer et heureusement. Parce que je pense qu'il y a quelques années de cela, nous étions comme en train d'assister à une communauté internationale qui était une communauté internationale dévoyée, des 5 qui peuvent s'opposer par un veto à toute décision. Maintenant, la donne a changé. Nous sommes devenus une même communauté internationale. Qu'est-ce que nous avons en partage? Nous avons en partage la vulnérabilité. Nous sommes aussi bien vulnérables à Gao, Tombouctou et Kidal qu'en Ukraine ou ailleurs. Et la guerre en Ukraine nous a aidés quand même à nous rendre compte que c'était la fin, c'était le temps de prendre conscience de ce que j'appelle de la hiérarchie des guerres qui a jusqu'ici fonctionné. Il y a 5 ans de cela, le G5 Sahel couraient encore derrière 300 millions d'euros pour achever quelques initiatives, faire des projets, et on dit qu'il n'y a pas de ressources. Et en un après-midi, pour l'Ukraine, on a pu regrouper, lever des fonds à hauteur de plusieurs milliards. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait une hiérarchie des guerres. Mais aujourd'hui, nous les Africains, nous sommes rendus compte de quelque chose et qui est fondamental et qu'il faut que le monde le sache. C'est que désormais, le basculement stratégique du continent africain peut changer la configuration des puissances sur la scène internationale. C'est pour cela qu'on nous parle de position, prenez position, etc. Et je crois que ce offshore balancing est tout à fait bénéfique pour l'Afrique. Et je termine sur un mot. Maintenant, il faut nous retrouver. Mais autour de quoi? Pendant très longtemps, l'agissement de nos amis occidentaux a complètement dévoyé la notion même de démocratie. Ils ont, dans leur compétition avec les puissances montantes, les puissances occidentales ont sacrifié les valeurs sacro-saintes de démocratie, de liberté, derrière, sur l'autel de leur intérêt stratégique immédiat pour concurrencer la Chine et les autres. Et aujourd'hui, on les appelle les autocraties. Et je crois que l'Afrique a pris conscience, comme l'a dit notre ami d'Israël tout à l'heure. Nos amis arabes ne disent pas autre chose. Ils disent et je suis sûr qu'il y a une prise de conscience. Et j'en termine là, lors d'une discussion avec une chancelière allemande récemment, avant qu'elle ne quitte la scène politique, je lui disais que, madame, si vous pensez que ce qui se passe en Afrique, dans le Sahel, ne vous concerne pas, vous êtes en train de faire fausse route. Parce que tôt ou tard, vous allez y recevoir votre part, soit des vagues d'immigration que vous ne pourrez jamais arrêter, ou le terrorisme qui frappe tout le monde. Et je pense que cette prise de conscience, que nous sommes désormais une communauté internationale des vulnérables, cette prise de conscience, à mon avis, est un bon point de départ pour aller vers un changement concernant le multilatéralisme. Je vous remercie.
Mr. Samba, thank you so much for looking at the global problems, the global vulnerabilities, but also zooming in on the continent. Very interesting remarks. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to our friend, Professor Frédéric Ansel. He's a professor of international relations and geopolitics at Sciences Po Paris. Please, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est difficile d'intervenir le dernier, parce qu'évidemment, beaucoup de choses intéressantes ont été dites, notamment par mon camarade. Et moi aussi, je suis très heureux d'être invité régulièrement dans un tel forum, un tel cénacle, dans une ville et un pays d'avenir. Je dis ça de manière parfaitement objective. J'ai une mauvaise nouvelle, et après j'ai deux bonnes nouvelles. Et puis j'ai deux projets. Tout ça en, combien, Monsieur le Président? 4 minutes. Je vous promets de respecter le timing. La mauvaise nouvelle, c'est que, mais peut-être suis-je trop pessimiste, c'est que d'un point de vue anthropologique, on n'arrivera jamais sur cette planète à anéantir toute forme de jalousie, d'égoïsme, d'impérialisme, de racisme. En tout cas, pas totalement, pas définitivement. Ça, pour le coup, je n'y crois pas. La première bonne nouvelle, c'est que, en dépit de cela, nous sommes tous sur le même bateau. Et tu l'as très bien rappelé il y a un instant. Là, ce qui se produit sur le plan climatique, aux Pays-Bas, comme au Pakistan, au Chili, en France, comme dans beaucoup d'autres lieux en Afrique, en Asie, en Océanie, bien sûr, et ailleurs, nous rappelle l'évidence, nous sommes sur le même bateau. Mais nous sommes également sur le même bateau sur le plan politique et militaire. Ce qui se déroule aujourd'hui en Ukraine a des conséquences sur l'ensemble de la planète, y compris dans des zones extraordinairement éloignées où on ne savait peut-être pas forcément où placer l'Ukraine sur une carte du monde. Ça, on le sait aujourd'hui. Et c'est une très très bonne chose et c'est une très bonne nouvelle. Par ailleurs, la deuxième bonne nouvelle, me semble-t-il, c'est que nous avons, tous autant que nous sommes, une expérience du XXe siècle, de certains siècles passés, mais notamment du XXe, parfaitement catastrophique, voire cataclysmique, avec un ensemble d'épisodes liés à la famine, à des guerres bien évidemment, notamment mondiales, à des génocides. Et je pense que dans le cadre de cette deuxième bonne nouvelle, on doit mettre l'expérience, on doit placer le savoir du pourquoi. On sait globalement pour quelles raisons majeures ça a pu se produire. Et là, je voudrais intervenir sur une proposition qui concerne l'ONU. Et puisqu'il me reste plus que 10 minutes, je vais faire vite. je pense que nous devrions, tous autant que nous sommes citoyens, mais également institutions et États naturellement, revendiquer une plus grande représentativité de l'ONU. Bon, je crois que je n'ai pas besoin de faire un dessin. L'ONU d'aujourd'hui est celle de 1945 et pose bien évidemment des problèmes qui ont été soulevés par certains d'entre vous. J'y reviens pas. Mais surtout, une ONU plus efficace, c'est-à-dire qui ne se contente pas d'un volet ou d'une dimension politique, qui est fondamentalement sa vocation depuis 1945, mais une dimension et un volet social. En France, il y a, et vous le savez tous ici, un adage ou un dicton très important, ventre affamé n'a point d'oreille. C'est faux. Ventre affamé a l'oreille des extrémistes. Et les extrémistes, quelle que soit leur nature politique ou religieuse, quels que soient les cieux sous lesquels ils exercent leur magistère négatif, font le malheur de l'humanité. Je pense que nous avons tous, et notamment les pays du Nord, une responsabilité écrasante, et j'en finis, pour faire qu'une grande partie de l'humanité qui a encore faim et qui par conséquent se trouve soumise à non seulement de grands malheurs, mais à une instabilité qui de toute façon fera chuter, fera couler l'ensemble du bateau. Si on y prend garde, je pense que nous avons tous aujourd'hui cette responsabilité et que ça doit passer non pas par une ONU bis, mais par l'actuelle ONU qui quand même aujourd'hui fait à peu près ce qu'elle peut ou a fait ce qu'elle a pu dans un cadre qui lui a été imposé en d'autres temps. Merci.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Ansel. For zooming out on the bad news than the good news, but reminding everyone on the global responsibility that is in front of us ahead of these challenges. A wonderful way to end this part of the session. The next part of our session is for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please raise your hand. We have a question over here. We have a question over here. And then we have a question over here. We'll take them in three. Please make your questions and not comments. And please, if you're going to make your questions, make them short and address them to the panel. Introduce yourself and then ask your question, please. If one of the organizers can bring a microphone over here. Oh, if you have a microphone in front of you, please go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Tumenta Kennedy, the CEO of African Business Information Bank. If I get the contribution from the representative from of Israel, it's a little bit scaring, but also encouraging. Encouraging because each and every one of the countries sitting here, we have the right to protect ourselves. And if we allow multilateralism to government and to politicians, we will not be able to protect the interests of the people. So do you think if we build a new form of multilateralism that is based on protecting the interests of ordinary people, a multilateralism that is not based on protecting country, do you think that we can have a certain advantage in building a sustainable multilateralism?
Thank you for your question. I'd like to come over here for our second person.
Thank you very much. My name is Anton Giulio Calenda from Italy for Limes, Italian Geopolitical Magazine. My question is for Madame Ambassador Alawi. I was curious, you mentioned that you have a bizarre hypothesis of resolution for the actual war between Ukraine and Russia, and please, if you can give us this hypothesis, I will be very grateful to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take the last question. I believe it was over here on the right.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dr Abdelhafid Ouelalo, vice-président de l'Institut marocain des relations internationales. Mes félicitations à Madame Alawi qui nous a rappelé beaucoup de choses sur les pays non alliés et leur position quant à multilatéralisme depuis 1945. J'ai une question à Monsieur Ohana que je respecte beaucoup parce que ses parents sont d'origine marocaine. Bienvenue au Maroc. Et je lui pose une petite question. Vous avez dit qu'Israël est le pays le plus menacé au monde. Expliquez-nous, pour un pays qui a des centaines de têtes nucléaires, entouré de pays dans le chaos, comme la Syrie, le Liban, l'Irak et les autres, ils ont normalisé les relations. Comment se fait-il qu'Israël reste toujours un pays qui refuse la paix? Et vous rappelez que au Maroc, quand on a signé cet accord avec les États-Unis et Israël, Sa Majesté a bien réaffirmé devant le monde que le Maroc est solidaire avec le peuple palestinien autant qu'avec les autres pays et peuples qui luttent pour leur liberté et leur indépendance, et qu'il a même rappelé que la question palestinienne est au même niveau que la question du Sahara marocain. Merci.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to our guests if they would like to answer the questions.
Yes, I will begin. Yes, Israel is the most... Yes, I said yes, Israel is the most threatened country in the world. Even before it was established back in 1948, it faced terror just for the mere reason of Jews living in their homeland. In just one weekend of August 23rd, 1929, 133 Jews were slaughtered, butchered, killed in Hebron, in Sfat, in other locations throughout Israel by their Arab neighbors that could not accept the idea that Jews have a right to live in their homeland. When we established the country in 1948, 5 Arab militaries tried to annihilate us and to kill us. And that all was much, much before 1967, when we liberated/occupied, depending on your point of view, the territories of Judea and Samaria that for 3,000 years are called Judea. Judea from the word Jew. This is where you find the ancient remainings of our people living in this country. This is the cradle of our existence as a people, and still we are facing the hardest aggression from countries and from Arabs living around us, but gladly we see more and more Arab countries, including this one, that understands that we must move towards not the Israeli-Arab conflict, but the Israeli-Arab alliance. Because although we have our differences, we share enemies. And one of the most serious enemy and threat that we share is the enemy of radicalism and fundamentalism that threatens our freedom. So for that reason, if not other reasons, what I would like to see is more Arab countries joining that alliance with Israel to have a better future.
Thank you. Madam Alawi, please.
There was a meeting, lately for the Shanghai group that nobody probably has noticed, but which was really full of lessons, because we have seen China and a few Asian powers shunning from following blindly President Putin's. And I think that this is a window of opportunity, because the solution for Ukraine would be dialogue. It will never be threatening and escalation of more arms and more things until the last Ukrainian dies. So I think that this window of opportunity should be really seized by the powers, including Europeans, who really would like to talk to these countries, because they can have a pressure and influence on Putin, which the West doesn't have. On the contrary, more the West is aggressive versus Putin, more he will be radicalized. This is at least my reading. And I think that this is a potential possibility for dialogue. And dialogue is absolutely key. So I would like to take the opportunity to finish my minute or whatever, to answer in the panel, because we have great hope for dialogues. And I would like to give a piece of information concerning the relaunch of Morocco, European Union Green Partnership about agriculture, new renewable energy, and trade, which means everything, because it is cross sectors. The common will to go deeper after a few clouds between Morocco and the European Union, to expand and go deeper in the cooperation around common interest and vital interest, which is really green economy, circular economy, and the real issue for the survival of the humanity. And I think this is the real thing where I see a better and wider involvement of the civil society, to join the gentleman's remark about the peoples, not only states. Civil society should get a real efficient role and more active role to bring around solutions from people to people. And I'm in the sector of food security, and this is absolutely vital for the key issues that we are facing. Short of the involvement of civil society, of the business, and of NGOs in these global issues, which are very meaningful for the poorest and for the weakest, we have no solution for the survival of humanity on the planet. The planet will be there, but humanity won't be able to live on it.
Thank you, Madam Alaoui. I'd like to give Mrs. Romano a brief 2-second introduction, and then we're going to go back to more questions, but please.
First of all, thank you for your answer. It's exactly what we should do in terms of conflict resolution. I would like to address the question that was raised on the multilateralism, if it lost its purpose and it lost the direction, because the multilateralism is not about national interest, it's about the whole interest. And I think these formats were intended for good, and so we should reflect, go back, and look at what they were created in the first place. And I'm sure that deep down we haven't forgotten the humanity behind this creation. So in the future, what I believe is that we need to be aware of the main purposes of being united, expose the weaknesses of the multilateralism, and compromise on the united benefits, because the national interest in a multinational format, it doesn't work, and it was proven already. And I gave you also the example of the European Union. I do believe that if we don't adhere to these principles of cohesion, solidarity, compromise, dialogue, unity, then I'm afraid that we are on a road to go to nowhere. And if we want to indeed be efficient with a multilateral format, then we need to address the real questions and the real issues, which are economic, social, security, energy issues, and then we need to, I will come back to what Mrs. Ramon said, why the most vulnerable are the most affected in the crisis. Why? Because in the multilateral system, very often we use hypocrisy, double standard, imbalances, intolerances, and no dialogue, and what I have said before. So going back and trying to contribute to the most vulnerable, to increase, enhance their capacities in economic capacities, social capacities, infrastructure, whatever infrastructure, then we prove our efficiency, and then we prove that we didn't forget our purpose and our humanity.
Thank you, Madam Rana. I'd like to open it up again one more time for 3 more questions. Please, over here on the left, over here on the right. Please go ahead, please. Introduce yourself and then...
Wadrasi Abdulrahim, President of Euro-Africa Foundation. My question to Her Excellency Asiam Salah Alaoui. What is as your point of view, what will be the role of Africa in this new world order? Thank you.
Salam alaikum. Je suis Yassil Gamouz, docteur d'état-chercheur au sein de l'INCG Tanger, et je suis International Finance Specialist au sein du groupe Renault Maroc, usine de Tanger. Donc ma question, déjà, le monde aujourd'hui passe par un virage politico-économique très pointu. Donc en fait, on constate que les rapports de force sont en train de se redessiner. Dans ce contexte, comment les pays en voie de développement, je prends l'exemple du Maroc, peuvent agir afin de s'harmoniser avec cette nouvelle ère, tout en gardant nos acquis et nos bonnes amitiés. Donc, merci.
Vous posez la question à qui, monsieur? À tout le monde? Is there a third question? Anybody want to raise their hand? There's not a third question. We're going to go back. Oh, third question over here. Introduce yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, I'm an attendee from America, and my question is for Dr. Ophir Winter, and I'm wondering what the special relationship between Israel and Morocco can mean for the rest of the countries in the Abraham Accords. This is a, you know, as we saw with Minister Ohana, this is a country that has thousands of years of Jewish history, and I'm wondering what it can mean for other countries like Egypt that have had relations with Israel but are not fully, you know, these are cold pieces that have to be fully actualized. And I'm wondering what the work Morocco and Israel are doing can be, how that can be applied to other contexts to deepen relations. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Madam Alawi, please.
Well, it's a very tall question, but very briefly we could say that Africa is really the continent of the future, and I do believe very seriously in that. We have the energy of its youth, assuming it is better educated, better involved in the participation for larger respect of human rights and for democracy. We have the digitalization, which is on the road, and we have the creativity of Africans. This is important. We do neglect this aspect because we are so much accustomed to hurdles, to blocking points, that we have probably more imagination to go around for easy solutions, perhaps, to some very tricky problems. Above, of course, all the necessary research, innovation, and just name it, the stability and to settle, you know, the conflicts, which are unfortunately. So we have to stop the really involvement of the outside powers in a negative way. There could be some kind of co-development, assuming we are negotiating with our friends in Europe or elsewhere on equal footing for the benefit of the peoples of Africa and for the interest for Africa. We have to better implement all what we have been accomplishing, including the ZLICAF, the free trade agreement, the continental free trade agreement. I think there are a lot of potential, and don't forget that we have 60% of the Arab land. What we need is to exploit it better, to increase productivity, to increase the purchase power, so the small farmers can buy fertilizers and can use better innovative technologies in order to improve food security, and better than that, to transform the food systems. That's what we need to make it conform to our evolution of the eating habits, which have been polluted, unfortunately, by some imported, you know, things. So there is a very large agenda, but I'm very hopeful because Africans are determined to work for the continent, and women are really, you know, on the top of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Alawi. Mr. Winter, please.
I will take this opportunity to present a little bit alternative Israeli approach than His Excellency Mr. Ohana. He spoke about of course, I agree with him that the military force is very important. Of course, also instrumental alliances in economic fields and other pragmatic issues are very important for all of us. But I think that Israel and also other countries, of course, should put an emphasis also on issues of identity, of our shared historical heritage, our shared values, our shared culture. And if we take, for example, I spoke before about the Mediterranean. I think that the Mediterranean, especially this city that we are in, Tanger, many port cities are a symbol and example of, you know, pluralism, of meetings of different civilizations, and of a lot of cultural interactions. So I think that this is something that we should put an emphasis on, also in the framework of multilateral cooperation. And I was asked about the Abraham Accords. And about Egypt, I think that part, what is special about the Abraham Accords, it's not only a cold peace like there is for more than 40 years between Israel and Egypt. It's actually a strategy of warmer peace that includes not only coping mutual threats and economic collaboration, but also fostering cultural, people-to-people relations. And also, if I just in one sentence, there is the Negev Forum, which was established last March with the participants of Egypt, the old peace country, with the new Abraham Accords country, and that put also one committee that deals with education and tolerance, religious tolerance, and I hope that our next government, that of course Mr. Ohana will play a very important role, will keep pushing it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to come back to you now for a final round of questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. Forever hold your peace. And then I'm going to come back to the participants, each and every one of you, for a minute and a half, and I'm going to have to cut microphones if we go much over, but a minute and a half concluding remarks. So if you have a question over here, first question. Do we have any other, a second question over here? And I think that we're done. Okay, please, first question.
Bonjour, je suis Simon Skira, je suis israélien, marocain et français. Mais je voudrais profiter de l'occasion pour dire à Monsieur le Président de l'Institut international que j'ai vécu 30 ans en Israël et je vis toujours, mes enfants, ma famille est là-bas. Est-ce que vous savez qu'il y a la paix des peuples? Et il y a 800 000 originaires du Maroc en Israël. Alors c'est très bien de parler des Palestiniens, on les voit tous les jours. Où ils nous attaquent, où ils travaillent avec nous. Il y a plus de 100 000 Palestiniens qui viennent tous les jours en Israël travailler. Donc, ce n'est pas rien que de la politique nette et claire. Et nous sommes avec Sa Majesté Mohammed VI, que Dieu l'assiste. Nous le suivons tous les jours. Nous sommes en Israël, mais notre cœur est au Maroc. Et ce qui est important, c'est...
Pardon, monsieur, vous avez une question? Si vous avez une question, posez la question.
La question, c'est est-ce que vous savez qu'il y a cette paix? Et est-ce que vous savez qu'il y a des dizaines de vols directs entre les deux pays?
Merci. Second question over here, please.
Thank you. My name is Hussein. I'm international student from University of Luxembourg. First, I will like to congratulate Minister Amir for coming here to Morocco and to support peace everywhere. I would love to ask you, do you see Morocco as a very good example to expand the Abraham Accords? Especially many countries were saying that dealing with Israel is like dealing with an enemy. But later we have concluded that dealing with Israel is dealing with a peace actor. And this is my personal opinion, but over the years, I have seen the aids from Israel to African countries and even though to Sudan, Arab countries. So do you see the example of Morocco will as well expand to other countries? And do you consider joining the African Union?
Thank you, Hussein. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it back. Please keep your comments, and then I'm gonna bring it back for each person to bring 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes concluding remarks. Please, Mr. Ndiaye, the floor is.
Je vais très, cher ami, très bref. D'abord, un constat. Durant ces 2 dernières années, nous avons tous constaté qu'il y avait une baisse de la coopération et de la solidarité internationale. La crise de la Covid l'a prouvé. Et je pense qu'il faut absolument en tirer les leçons. Je pense que dans ce contexte, il faut essayer de réinventer, je pense, le multilatéralisme et faire en sorte que la perception que les populations ont des Nations Unies, par exemple, puisse changer, qu'on tienne compte de leurs priorités. Je me rappelle très bien que le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, à la veille de la célébration du 75e anniversaire de l'organisation, avait lancé un sondage. Il y a 1 million de personnes à travers le monde qui ont participé à ce sondage pour donner leur point de vue sur ce qu'ils considéraient comme les priorités du monde d'aujourd'hui. C'est un document qui est aujourd'hui en cours d'exploitation par le secrétaire général. Et pour terminer, je pense que nous avons besoin, pour répéter le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, que nous avons besoin de multilatéralisme plus fort et de meilleure qualité, et qui fonctionne efficacement et qui bénéficie réellement aux populations. Donc tirons les leçons de la crise de la Covid, en tout cas pour une réflexion plus innovante sur la coopération internationale, sur la solidarité internationale et sur le multilatéralisme. Merci.
Thank you for respecting the time. Mr. Yakesh, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, we began with the multilateralism and the death of the multilateralism, but multilateralism has never died. It has existed all the way through. It's still standing, and it is very steadily moving within the framework of the United Nations by adhering to the conventions. Each convention is a piece of multilateralism, and this will continue. There will be disruption in another sense of the multilateralism when there are conflicts in the world. Of course, the multilateralism has failed, but we should not take this example as the interruption of the multilateralism. Multilateralism continues with certain hurdles, and it will continue forever and develop. Thank you.
Before we go to you, Mr. Akazi, I would just like to give the floor to Mr. Sambe, who's about to leave, after your permission, of course. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et je pense que, comme on dit chez nous, ceux qui ne peuvent pas se séparer n'ont qu'à aller ensemble. Mais pour aller ensemble, ça devait être sur de nouvelles bases. Cette nouvelle base du multilatéralisme, c'est sur les valeurs. Ma crainte aujourd'hui, c'est que les valeurs auxquelles nous tenons encore en Afrique, la démocratie, l'état de droit, nous y tenons encore, mais ces valeurs-là, aujourd'hui, ont besoin d'être recrédibilisées après l'attitude des puissances occidentales qui nous ont prêché ces valeurs et sont comportées autrement ces dernières années. Ma crainte qu'aujourd'hui, et je la soulève, c'est qu'on retombe dans le nationalisme, dans les populismes, dans les extrémismes, pour retourner au point de départ de ce qui avait donné naissance aux Nations Unies, alors que jusqu'à présent, nous sentons que cette conscience de sécurité collective, elle est réelle, mais il faut y aller ensemble, mais l'Afrique voudrait que ce soit sur de nouvelles bases. Merci.
Thank you, Bakary. Please, Your Excellency.
Well, with all the optimism for the new multipolar global order, we have to take into account the factor, civilizational factor. After the Second War, it was the European powers themselves who divided the world and then moved on and created this rivalry between communist and non-communist world. Now, with the coming up of the China, there is a civilizational factor. And this is something because there is a legacy of colonialism on the part of West, where they have had this sense of superiority, and they look down upon other civilizations. Now, how do they overcome that looking down on other civilization? That will be the great determining factor, and how we accommodate different civilizations to exist and coexist and progress and flourish.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Madam Ambassador, Your Excellency, please.
Écoutez, j'ai déjà beaucoup parlé, donc juste 2 mots. C'est pour insister sur l'attachement de mon pays au multilatéralisme et comment il l'a prouvé à travers ses agissements, sa diplomatie. L'attachement au dialogue, qui est bien entendu le vecteur de paix par excellence. Il l'a encore démontré récemment par l'appel de Sa Majesté, l'invitation lancée au président de l'Algérie. Et bien entendu, il vient aussi de le démontrer par sa gestion du Covid, où le Maroc est apparu comme une alternative possible à la rupture de la chaîne des valeurs et qu'il est prêt à le faire dans le partage et dans l'amitié et dans la solidarité avec nos amis qui en ont le plus besoin, dont nos amis africains.
Madam Ramona, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If I will, it would be to sum up a bit, I will say for the war in Ukraine, yes, diplomacy, dialogue, it's what we need. We need to reinstall the communication, and we need to just to remember the Cold War and the fact that now we are missing the dialogue between US and Russia, which established a clear mechanism that prevent escalation. So maybe we need to go back to that. If it's about multilateralism, I fully agree that we still need it, and we need to be attached to the causes and to the good purposes for what it serves, but in the same time we need to be aware, to see clearly, to admit the weaknesses so we can adjust it in right time and effectively for everybody, not only for the strongest.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Ohana, please.
Thank you. I will also answer Hussein's question and also conclude. So thank you, Hussein, for your lovely question. Allah ya'awnk. Yes, I do consider Morocco as being a gate not only to Africa, but also to the Arab world. Not only for being such a significant and powerful and one of the leaders of the Arab world, but also because of its nature. And by that I mean, I think Morocco, more than other Arab countries, is more open, more pluralistic, more accepting. It is also something that is very typical to Moroccan Jewry when I'm a part of it in Israel. So I think by that, Morocco can play a very significant role in opening doors to the Arab world and to Africa. I hope that answers your question. And to conclude, as an individualist, not only in my personal view, but also in my national view, I do want that the countries, the different countries in the world will remain independent, defining themselves, having their different natures, and we shouldn't strive to the world of John Lennon saying, imagine that everyone will speak the same language and be the same. I want us to live in peace together, but remain different from each other. Thank you.
Madam Rahman, please.
Thank you. I promised to say how to put Global South issues in multilateral agenda. I have a minute and a half to explain how to do that. Well, it won't be easy, that's for sure. We need a lot of dialogue, but bearing also in mind, a lot of South-South dialogue, but bearing in mind we do share the structural issues and structural problems, but not always we share the same policies and recommendations. So it's going to be a difficult task in finding common ground, but we certainly have to do it. Another thing I wanted to mention is this morning, someone mentioned the need for G20 to have a G20 plus. And I was thinking about it, and without trying to kick anyone out of G20, when you think of its composition, you have the European Union, but you also have Germany, France, Italy, and you have Spain as a permanent guest. I used to have the UK as well. That's sort of an overrepresentation, particularly taking into account Africa has only one member, Latin America 3. So that I think that needs to be addressed. And finally, I think it's quite a window of opportunity to have the next presidencies of G20 by the Global South. Indonesia has been a shame because it's been clouded by the war, but hopefully India, Brazil and South Africa next will provide a better ground for Global South issues to be more in the agenda. Finally, there's a crisis in multilateralism in China. Crisis is way G, way is danger, G is opportunity. Let's seize this opportunity, because no one's going to give it to us freely, so we might as well seize it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kabi.
Thank you very much. I would like to conclude by saying this old proverb that money doesn't like noise, and multilateralism offers that peaceful environment for money to flow. So if our government still want to be collecting taxes from investment, we should continue to push and strive to maintain multilateralism at maybe 2.0, simply because we want money investment to flow. And I think in this case, again, Africa offers the great opportunity for money to flow, because we understand that we need to come together to be united, for investment to flow, for our people to have jobs, for wealth to be created, and for also Africa to show a different way of implementing multilateralism. Thank you.
If you have a
just one word, I think on behalf of all of us, I want to extend our wishes of good health to King Mohammed VI, who was so gracious to give his to give his protege to this conference.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Winter, please.
I will just conclude saying that in world of conflicts, sometimes we still need the world powers in multilateral frameworks. For example, the United States and its role in the Abraham Accords, or the European Union in the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, because they expand the equilibrium of interests, of rewards for all sides. They give sometimes investments and funds. They bring more legitimacy for relations between rival parties, and it also make all parties be more committed to multilateralism in times of conflict, and put together the North and the Southern countries.
Mr. Insel, the final.
Encore le dernier. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout à l'heure, le jeune homme a posé une question importante concernant les moyens d'un certain nombre de pays en voie de développement, et du Maroc en particulier, pour sortir pour accroître ses capacités. Me vient à la bouche le terme de formation et de valorisation du savoir. On a beaucoup entendu parler, et à juste titre cet après-midi, de coopération énergétique. Or, on sait aujourd'hui qu'il faudra bien en finir avec le pétrole, il faut en finir d'une manière ou d'une autre avec le gaz naturel, et en l'occurrence, ne l'oublions pas, avec le charbon. Vous avez évoqué le Maroc. Sans une goutte de pétrole, sans un mètre cube de gaz naturel, avec des phosphates qui, franchement, jusqu'à un temps très récent, ne valaient pratiquement rien, et qui aujourd'hui sont abondants au Sahara, c'est très bien, mais enfin, c'est quand même pas le pétrole. Au Maroc, bien sûr, au Sahara marocain. C'est exactement ce que je suis en train de dire, cher monsieur. C'est juste, c'est juste. Et donc, au Maroc et au Sahara, et qui en fait partie. Et je pense qu'il faut absolument valoriser le savoir. En géopolitique, un concept nous tient à cœur, c'est celui de la malédiction du pétrole. C'est évidemment un terme générique, qui ne concerne pas que le pétrole. La malédiction du pétrole, c'est la malédiction de la rente. Il faut sortir de la rente. La valorisation du savoir, c'est, et j'en finis, à titre personnel, ce que je vois lorsque j'interviens très souvent en France, je sais un peu de quoi je parle, dans d'autres pays européens, au Canada, aux États-Unis, en Afrique subsaharienne francophone, où les professionnels en provenance du Maroc sont d'un très haut niveau. Merci.
Thank you, Frederick, for your final concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the session. It was an exciting panel because I think we've heard so many different perspectives. I think that there are some commonalities. That the trend is that the world is getting more difficult, that the challenges are not going away anytime soon. We've heard some optimistic notes about how trade can be the multilateralism 2.0. But I think that we're not going to get short from this question away. I think next year this is going to be a question that is at the top of the agenda. And so I'd like to thank not only my distinguished guests and panelists today, But I'd like you to thank yourselves and the audience for asking amazing questions. Thank you for engaging, but please, ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome and a thank you to all of the panelists. Thanks again, and see you next time.